Welcome to Career and Leadership Real Talk, the no-nonsense guide for ambitious managers who want to have more impact and progress their career. I'm Pamela Langan, a job search coach and expert CV writer specialising in helping frustrated professionals land the jobs and pay rises they know they deserve.
And I'm Jackie Jagger, a leadership and mindset coach specialising in helping newly promoted and new to role leaders to avoid the dickhead trap and lead with confidence. Between us, we've helped hundreds of leaders and managers to find new roles, take ownership of their careers, and handle the challenges that job searches and leadership responsibility inevitably bring. And now we're joining forces to share with you what we know has worked for our clients.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode. Today, we are talking about something that has come up in career coaching, which is an interesting one because I think a lot of what we talk about has come up on the leadership side or the job search side. And this is more that broader career aspect. And it's the question of whether to pursue a specialist or a generalist career path. And this one brings up loads of interesting discussion and debate with clients. So we thought it was a good episode to dig into that and to share perhaps what's come up if you're asking that question of yourself. Pam, talk us through, first of all, the sort of definition, because I think even understanding what does it mean to have a specialist career path or a generalist sometimes is not a question that people have considered. So how would you define, let's start with specialist, how would you define a specialist career path? What does that mean in practice?
So I think somebody who is a specialist, they are someone who is going to focus really deeply on a specific area. So think of roles such as, for example, a data scientist in a tech company or a brand manager in a marketing department. So specialists are generally known for their deep knowledge and insight and skills within those areas that they are working in.
And how does that differ from a generalist? Because if you take that example of a brand manager, there'll be all kinds of skills. So you'd still need a broad skill set. So from a career path perspective, how do the two differ? Because I think sometimes the skill set versus the career path bit does get confused.
Yeah, and this is something that comes up pretty much a lot of our clients, doesn't it? And we, as you mentioned, we see this a lot in career coaching because a lot of the time people don't know where they stand. Are they more specialist? Are they more generalist? And I think with a generalist tends to have a broader range of knowledge. They tend to know and have an understanding of things across multiple fields. They are a lot more adaptable and flexible and can easily transition between different roles and different tasks. So usually generalists include project managers, say business consultants, and a lot of the time entrepreneurs as well. So there's a real difference there, but then the two do overlap. And I think that's why it comes up a lot in career coaching, because often people think there aren't any opportunities in this direction. So maybe I need to diversify. Maybe I need to be a little bit more specialist or a little bit more generalist. And that's where the career coaching is really useful, because where they don't know which way to go, then that's really helpful to help them to understand which is going to be the best path based on what they've got and where they would like to be.
And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because it comes up a lot at the type of level that we tend to work with. So most of our clients are in the kind of 50 to 100K salary bracket. They have done well already in their career and they're ambitious to progress further. But in getting to where they've got to, they've often had multiple experiences of different roles, different companies. And so that question of what comes next, they've never necessarily set out to create a specialist path or a generalist path. And I think of them as being almost a bit of a continuum, really, where at one end you've got very clearly, evidently generalist paths. And on the other hand, perhaps in some of the industries around kind of academia, science, technology, you do have a lot more clear specialist paths, but it's very common for it to be somewhere in the broader spectrum and less evident, isn't it, at that point, particularly if you've done leadership and management roles, because that in itself becomes broader.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is what really gets people stuck and wondering what next and wondering how they get past this. And we hear so often of people going for interviews and the feedback will be, we don't like interview feedback, do we don't advocate interview feedback, but the feedback that does come back and we hear from clients is that you're too specialist or you're too generalist, and we wanted somebody who was the other way. Now, in my opinion, that feedback is rubbish, but this is what sticks with people, and this is what starts to also make people think, am I on the right track? Am I doing what I need to be doing? Do I need to be more specialist or more generalist? So what I usually say is, when you're thinking about what do you actually want to do next? Do you want to be more specialist? Do you want to be more generalist? You might even want to be a mix of both, and that's fine. So maybe you'll be more on the generalist side with a specialism in something. But what you can start to think about is, first of all, do you prefer working on a variety of projects or just focusing really deeply on one area? Because that is then going to give you that difference. And then secondly, are you more comfortable with routine and making things almost perfect, getting so into that routine that you can do that standing on your head and it's the same thing over and over again? Or do you thrive in changing environments where you go in and you don't know what's going to happen today? Some people absolutely love that. Some people hate that. So that's the second thing. Are you more comfortable with routine or changing environments? Thirdly, do you enjoy learning about different subjects, or do you prefer to just be on top of one particular topic or subject? That's definitely gonna make that decision for you. And I think at different times and different points in your career, then you might change. You don't have to decide at this point in your career, right, I'm going to be more specialist and that's it then for life. Things will change depending on your personal circumstances or what's going on in your life outside of work. So what you decide now isn't actually what you then need to stick to for the rest of your career or the rest of your life. And then I think the fourth thing is thinking about how you handle uncertainty and how you handle change in your work environment. If you're somebody that hates change, then being a generalist is probably not going to work out well for you. And again, with the uncertainty, if you need to go in every day and know what you're doing, know what you're working on, then looking at more of a specialist role might work better for you. Just thinking about those 4 areas and reflecting on your past experiences, and also thinking about what you want to do going forward, and thinking about things like work-life balance and that kind of stuff as well. Like, what is going to work for you moving forward, and how much headspace have you got for all of this stuff as well? It's one thing deciding that you would now like to be more specialist in an area, but how much time have you got to dedicate to that subject to really learn it in depth? And that's something else that you need to think about as well. It's not just like a decision that you make and go, okay, that's what I'm going to do. There's lots of other factors that are going to then link into that too.
I'm laughing as you're describing those kind of questions for people to self-assess against, because every single marker throughout my entire career, I am a generalist through and through, and I'm really happy and comfortable in that space. It works really well for me. And so my idea of hell is really deep knowledge on one thing and not being able to go and do shiny object and learn about other things and get involved in different projects. For me, the idea of that real deep focus that prohibits other stuff, I've always loved learning that kind of, I'm quite happy with a certain depth of knowledge. I don't like to just be completely at surface level. I like to go deeper than that. And I think it's important to say that generalists don't just have a surface level knowledge of everything. They can go deeper in a number of areas, but it's not that real mastery. So when you were talking about routine, for me, I guess the word that I see from specialists is that real, you know, I feel sometimes in awe in presence of specialists, because the mastery that they have of their kind of topic, their specialism, that level of depth, and I could only aspire to that, but I know that I don't want the process of getting to that point. And I'm very happy with my generalist and will always plant the flag for generalists. So I think it's just acknowledging that there's no better or worse. It's totally fine to choose whichever naturally fits. And I think those are really helpful questions for people to consider and reflect on, to make that decision about where do they naturally lean, and to acknowledge that can have changed, because it may have been that at the start of your career you were further one way, you may have been more general, and now actually one thing that you've started to build knowledge of, you want to really go deep with, that's the thing that really lights you up. It may be that you started quite specialist and actually I've got to a level of mastery with that, but I don't particularly want to continue just with that thing. I want to have more strings to my bow now. So I think that's really helpful. If people have got to that decision, then broadly speaking of, okay, I want to pursue more of a specialist versus more of a generalist, what are some of the strategies that people can put into place? Let's again take the specialist path first. How can people really pursue that? What can they do if they've made that decision for their career?
Okay, so I think the first thing that you need to do is you need to decide on what you are going to specialize in. And then that's where you need to then build that real deep level of knowledge, expertise, or mastery, as you said. And this is where you then need to look at what are the qualifications, the advanced education and certifications that you can take that align with that particular subject. What else can you do? Who can you work with? Who could you be mentored by? What's going on in the industry? What are the latest developments? And constantly staying in touch with what is next, what is coming next, and what can I learn next? I think that's where you can then get to that stage where you've got, or you're developing that real deep learning. And I think the key thing with being a specialist is you're never going to know everything. It's going to be a constant learning journey. So you need to be almost 3 steps ahead all of the time and thinking about what is coming next, who else can I learn from, what is going on within the industry. And then that probably leans in quite nicely to the networking and personal branding side of things, because in order to keep on top of industry developments, then you need to have those connections within the industry to know exactly what's happening. So you want to be thinking about who are the almost like the movers and shakers. It's a little bit of a cliche term, but within the industry, so that you can then be on their radar, you can keep in touch with them, you can understand what's going on. And obviously then that links in to personal branding for yourself, because you then obviously need to position yourself in the industry as an expert, as a specialist in this area. And then just thinking about what you can do from a professional development perspective. And that will probably include looking for mentors and maybe even engaging in some research and development projects, dependent on the area that you're working in. There's lots of things that you can do. Once you start digging into it, there'll be loads and loads of certifications and qualifications and all the rest of it. And that's where the mentors might come in quite useful as well, because the mentors will be able to give you an insight onto what is actually useful and what is just going to be something that not necessarily waste your time, but just it takes you along for the ride, but it doesn't really add that much extra to what you've got. Use those mentors, find out what they did, find out what they'll be focusing on. And also just think about looking at what are the journals, the trade journals within that industry, like what is going on, what are people publishing, what are people putting out there, what messages are people wanting you to hear. And that's just about putting yourself into the space and really understanding that and almost immersing yourself. If you're going to be a specialist in an area, you need to immerse yourself within that area. You need to know everything about that area. You need to know all of the key people, and you also need to keep yourself a few steps ahead so that you're always learning, you're always moving forward.
I think those external connections are so crucial, aren't they, for specialists? Because by nature, when you specialize, it's likely that you will be either the single or one of a very few within your organization who have that level of knowledge. So while that can feel great because go me, I've got all the knowledge, actually then you don't get the opportunity internally within your organization to get that kind of learning and that stretch and that challenge to your thinking. You have to develop those relationships externally in order to find those mentors, to find that way of kind of building and growing and continuing to build the experience.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Those external mentors, because lots of people will think, who can mentor me from inside the organization? But as a specialist, what you'll find is there'll be very few people within your organization, and it is those key industry people that you need to then link in with and see if they can mentor you or point you in the right direction, so that you are constantly learning from them. And I suppose that then the other side of that is going to be the strategies for generalists, because as a generalist, you also need to create a great network, and you also need to create a great personal brand, but you also need to focus on building that broader skill set. So, whilst you're looking at what is it that you're going to be working on, what is going to be most useful, and also thinking about developing transferable skills. So rather than focusing in and going, okay, what are the qualifications and certifications that are going to make me a specialist? It's about looking at that overall and going, okay, what are the transferable skills that I can develop that mean I can be more adaptable, that I can work across more projects, that I can work across more areas within a business, and I can create a name for myself as somebody who is adaptable, somebody who is a really strong generalist, and also keeping ahead of thinking about what education you need and what professional development opportunities there are to help you grow within those roles as well.
And I feel as well that there's often a difference in terms of size of organization. I know this is something we talked about before we started, where if you want a specialist career path, that's so much harder to do in smaller businesses, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's the thing in smaller businesses. And this is where a couple of my clients at the moment have found it really difficult, because one was a specialist and one was very much a generalist, and they were targeting smaller businesses, and a couple of those businesses were startup businesses as well. So they want specialists, but they also want the specialists to be hands-on and to do all of the work as well. And they were not in a position where they, first of all, wanted to do all of the hands-on stuff, but second of all, they wanted to be that specialist. Then on the other side of that, the person that was very much a generalist, they wanted them to specialize in certain areas that they were like, I've got knowledge of it, but actually I'm not a specialist in that area. And what you'll find in a smaller business is that they want the biggest return on investment for their money. So they want this unicorn person to come through who can specialize and be a generalist, do all of the hands-on stuff, be completely adaptable, and help them drive the business forward. But 9 times out of 10, somebody is either a specialist or a generalist, and they do have transferable skills. But this is where you need to make the decision on actually what it is that you want to do, because if you're going to go into a smaller business as a specialist, then it's almost like you need to be prepared to be more hands-on in some cases. And if you're thinking, I do want to be that specialist and I don't want to have to do all of the other stuff, I don't want to have to be a specialist with a generalist skill set, then you want to look at the bigger organizations where you can go and you can really specialize and you can be that specialist within those areas, and somebody else will be doing the hands-on elements of that role.
And the other thing I've seen with frustration for specialists with smaller organizations is they don't then have, even if you go in as a specialist into kind of a smallish or mid-size organization, they often don't have the kind of resource or the awareness of how much it's going to take to keep you at the forefront and to keep developing your specialist knowledge. So there can be that frustration that they maybe don't have the budget to send you to lots of industry events, or they don't have the budget to further your kind of professional and technical qualifications. So I think I would always urge caution for specialists. If you know that you want to specialize further, I would always say primarily look for organizations of a certain size and be prepared at recruitment to have some of those conversations about how do they maintain that professional development for their specialists? How do they push and continue to grow? What are they prepared to sponsor and pay for? Because what you don't want is to either be landed with a big bill to try and keep that up yourself, or to be in a situation where you suddenly haven't got that. And so you are a specialist to a degree, but then other people are getting further ahead as you're staying at that level that you've already been at. Conversely, often we've seen it, haven't we, recently with outplacement projects where people are worried that my skill set's too general and I've done this and this, but actually I don't have enough to go into a bigger company because they want someone that's a real specialist. And at that point, it can be a great opportunity to assess, do you want to specialize in one aspect that you've already got experience in and be pushed further? Because if you don't and you want to maintain that, then look for those mid-size or slightly smaller businesses where that can be an absolute godsend. And I think the other thing is that what you can do with a mid-sized business is you can have those opportunities. If you show that aptitude for very quickly getting up to speed in new areas, then mid-sized businesses can be a godsend because they might write a list that sounds like they're looking for a unicorn, but actually they can't get that. And so if you've got some knowledge and understanding and you want to go from being a real specialist to perhaps more of that generalist, that can be a great way to build more of that generalist skill set by having the opportunity to get involved with things that will be outside of your remit in a bigger business.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is definitely something to think about, especially if you are thinking about making a change in your career. And also, when most people go into an interview, they've just got their eye on the prize. So they don't make it that two-way conversation that asks the right questions around what is there on offer. That means that I can continue with my professional development and you can support me in being a specialist within your organization. And I think you need to think about those kinds of things as well as the standard questions that you'd ask them in an interview anyway. You need to be thinking about how do I or what do I ask to make sure that support is there, because if it's not, like you say, you'll end up with a big bill, or if you just get to the point where you stop that focus on that continuous development and you get to a point where all of a sudden to move roles, you now need to do a load more courses or you need a load more experience. So it's really key, rather than thinking about, I just want to get the job offer, actually making sure that what you need is in place.
So reflecting on all that we've covered, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground, and perhaps people haven't really had this question specifically. So maybe there's a lot coming up for people as they're listening to think, hang on, am I currently a specialist or more of a generalist? Which do I want and how would I go about that? So bringing all of that together, what would be your kind of key takeaways for people from today's episode?
I think the key takeaways are going to be around thinking about, first of all, thinking about where you are now. And are you on the more specialist side or are you on the more generalist side? And then thinking about what your long-term career goals are. And also, if you are on the specialist side, thinking about industry trends and demands and how sustainable is that specialism in the future. If you stay in this particular area, is there still going to be a job for you in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And thinking about how can you diversify? How can you build on that? How can you learn more? And also thinking about what you actually want from a personal perspective as well. So thinking about your personal strengths and interests, but also thinking about your work-life balance, because last time you thought about a career change or moving job or just generally thinking about where you're at in your career, your personal circumstances might have been a lot different. So it's always good to have that refresh and to think about, where am I now? And what does the next 12 months look like? And what does the next 3 years look like? And what does the next 5 years look like? Because there might be lots of different things that play into that. So just almost kind of draw the line in the sand now, think about where you are and what those longer term goals look like for you. Or if they're not clear, then it's about the reflection and the time to think about what you might want them to be.
Perfect. I hope that's helped for those of you that perhaps are at that kind of mid-career stage and starting to do some of that reflection. And please do rate and review, and please do let anybody that you know that is in this situation of perhaps considering what their next or longer term career move might need to be. Please share the episode with them. As ever, thank you for listening, and we will look forward to being back with you with another episode next week. Exciting news from us. If you're an ambitious leader or manager earning 50k or more and you're ready to take your career to the next level, we have an opportunity for you. Introducing Catalyst Career Club, your secret weapon for unlocking career success. As a member, you'll get access to monthly live training sessions, exclusive job opportunities, and the ability to get personalised advice from us on your toughest career challenges.
We've helped thousands of driven leaders like you secure significant pay rises, land dream roles, and thrive in their careers. And now we want to support you in achieving your most ambitious career goals too. Membership is just $6.99 per month with no contract or tie-in. And as a special bonus for being our podcast listeners, you can use the code podcast at checkout to get your first month for just £1. Head over to pamelalangan.com/Catalyst Career Club to sign up now, and we'll see you inside.